We are live streaming in 3, 2, 1, action.
Good evening. Today is Wednesday, August 2nd, and the board has just returned from executive session. We're going to begin this evening with the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we get started this evening, I think Dr. Laura would like to introduce some of our new staff members.
Thank you. We first say welcome to both of the two new employees and introduce Aaron Kleinman first, who is also is our Director of Guidance Services. He comes from us to us from his experiences are lengthy, but the latest one is from Mayapack. But welcome, and I'm going to ask each of them to say a few words. So Aaron, would you like to just introduce yourself to the board and say a few things?
Sure.
Thank you.
So good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. Very excited to be starting here at HHCSD. Look forward to working with the counselors and creating just an atmosphere of working with the students, faculty, and the community, and bringing part some information and programs to our guidance department and to the community. So I'm very, very excited to be here and look forward to working on tenure here at HHCSD.
Aaron, do me one favor. I know we're appointing you retroactive to, and he's been at our retreat, administrative retreat, and he's already hit the ground running with master schedule and working with Rich Lepre. Do you want to just any comments on some of the things that you've been doing?
Sure. So we have been taking a look at the scheduling, making sure everything is up and running and squared away. So we get ready to open our portal for our students and for our parents to see their scheduling. So we've been really taking a close look and making sure everything is fluid and everything is moving along nicely. So along with that, I've just been planning the calendar in terms of looking at our programming for counseling for September throughout the whole fall, winter, and spring, looking at our programs that we can develop for us, again, our students, our families, again, in support of everything we do in terms of counseling. So.
And I did forget to introduce you properly with the title of Dr. Aaron Kleinman.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you want to step in?
Welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And second, thank you. Our second person is Josh Thompson. Josh comes to us from Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES, his new position. He's taking the our replacement with from Karen Hoffman, who many of you know for years have been here. So we welcome Josh. And Josh, why don't you give us a little bit of your background? I think they'll understand more of the kinds of things you're capable of doing.
So I'm the new communication specialist here in the district, and I have over 20 years of experience as a journalist. I've worked for the last few months in district communications and Somers and Carmel, and actually did a few stories here in HUD during the spring. I just have a lot of experience as a journalist telling stories. So I'll be telling great stories from the district about the students and the teachers and the great programs, whether it's academic or athletic, and that are going on here in the district, and telling them in a various different ways. Telling stories, written stories, or social media posts, or taking photos, and just kind of all things that communicate to the community, the great things that are going on here in HUD.
Thank you, Josh. And you're both excused. Do not feel you have to stay. Thank you for both coming this evening.
Yes, thank you. All right. So before we get to our agenda, this evening we have our public hearing on a district-wide safety plan. Carmen, is anybody here signed up to speak? We give it a few minutes, see if anyone shows up.
All right. Hi, everyone. Dana Goyer. So I had a chance to look at the contract from the provider that is going to be setting up the monitoring, which is great. I was curious of where we are with soil testing, current baseline.
And also a current feasibility study, if there is any issues right now that we should be aware of, that we're planning to remediate in our respective areas of FGL and BV and the high school as pertaining to, this is safety.
Yeah, I think we're.
Different thing,
Yes, different.
but that is what I would love to know more about. So if the superintendent's maybe addressing that in a bit, that'd be great to hear.
Yeah, and it's really simple, Dana. There are a couple of things. First, tonight, we voting on that contract.
Yeah.
That we mentioned about the monitoring device, which took us more than several months. I arrived on the scene early and got on it, I would say, early March. It took us another few weeks to get the $500,000 back, and the governor was nice enough to give it. And we were continuing to work, again, from my previous experiences working at the Lyric. I had contact with a lot of computer technology people and asked them to get up working on it. And in the end, we came out and involved a few community members as well as our building and grounds people, and arrived at this particular contract with Aspire, but the particular device by Comac, which is a monitoring device specifically for the radiation.
Yeah.
And particularly at power plants. I'm going to say this much because I'm supposed to be careful about what I say about it, but I will say this much. First of all, one thing is the size of the units, everybody knows, is no bigger than a ream of paper. We're putting 2 on each of the buildings. If there's a problem with one, with our monitoring system, we would know immediately, and there would be the backup of the second.
Right.
The likelihood of both going out at the same time is pretty slim, what I've been told. And we're repeating that same thing on each of our 5 of our school buildings. So there'll be BB, and up here at FGL, the high school, the middle school, and Furnace Woods. So, and if you know anything about radiation and how it travels, obviously BB would be the first one to go off. And however, God forbid it should happen, there would be other notifications. Heaven forbid that there should ever be all 5 of them going off at the same time.
Yeah.
So that's that piece. On the flip side, the other pieces, because of the construction work that's going on right now up at BV, we want literally the dust to settle and clean the place out, and then do the appropriate testing. So we're trying to do that all before the school year begins. And today we had a report on the progress of how that was going. And I think we still have a window to get a firm in there to do that. And we can work off of our local contracts with BOCES. All we had to add to that was the radiation piece. So the normal things like dust and environmental are all normal things that they would do. It was adding the other component. And we found that in searching around, there are a couple of places that have done it before, and we'll be able to do it.
Okay.
So,
And you're gonna keep the public apprised in those.
Yes,
meetings of
we
what's
will.
happening. Okay,
definitely.
that's it. Thank you.
So we're back to our public hearing on the district-wide safety plan. I don't believe there's anyone else here to speak to the district safety plan.
We can move on, yeah.
Okay, we can move on now. Our next public hearing, no, just a public hearing. Our next public hearing is on our code of conduct. Is there anyone signed up? Okay, we have nobody currently signed up for the public hearing on the code of conduct, but we will give it a few minutes.
And one thing is good for the public to know. So none of these items have been brought to the board or to the public without review with administration. So the principals were involved along with the rest of the administrative team in terms of reviewing them and looking at, I think most of the editing has come from our own staff, although we did post on the website and picked up comments that way. So it's pretty comprehensive. It's been out there for more than a month. And we did it, I'm trying to think of how many weeks ago that our groups had discussed it as well.
I was just hoping that maybe administration could give us a report on page 16 of the code of conduct regarding the disciplinary and corrective consequences of bullying. There's some things listed in there. I would like to know what supportive intervention is, when it occurs, what peer support groups are there, what student counseling services do we offer, and when do we offer them? When was the last time the school district did a community survey on bullying? What staff development took place this year in regards to the prevention of bullying? And a lot of this is around the restorative justice piece. So when a student gets in-school suspension, what preventative measures do we give them? Or, what behavior managements do we give them inside in-school suspension? Or do they just sit in the in-school suspension room? When they get detention, what counseling do they get? I mean, how are we preventing the behavior from reoccurring, just instead of focusing on the punishment? I would like a report about that.
Cool, go back to that. All right, nobody's here to speak on the public hearing of the code of conduct, so we're going to close the public hearing and move on to our agenda for this evening. Can I have a motion to approve our agenda? Motion. Can I have a second? All in favor? Okay, we'll start with our audience comment section on agenda and non-agenda items. I think, Dana, you have another. Come on up.
So I want to say for the record that, good, okay. So I will just say for the record that the budget this past May did pass, and based on what I remember of all the budget presentations, Margaret, Dr. Ruler presented a budget that showed class sections for K1, 2, 3 at 8, as well as for 5th grade at 8, and for 4th grade to be at 6. And I'd like some confirmation of whether or not that will be what we pursue for next year. That's it. Thank you.
I assume you're not leaving us tonight. Dr.
No.
Laurel has an update on this topic, so if you just hang tight, we're gonna get to this soon. We're gonna go over the policy and what we're planning for and how we are looking at the school year that's coming up.
Perfect.
Okay?
Thank you.
Awesome. No other speakers coming? All right. Okay, does anyone have anything to pull from the consent agenda this evening? Tamika?
I wanted to pull 64.
Yeah. All right, and what's the first, I know there's a lot of items under there, so what's the first item that you'd like to review?
There's 2 for the budget transfers for
Okay.
BOCES. And I just wanted to understand what that covered and understand what reimbursements we also get from them.
Okay, Enrique, is that something that you can answer for Tamika and the board? I don't. Right.
Right, can you put up?
You want here, we have them.
Okay, so I can know which ones.
Is it budget transfer 1, 2, or?
We don't know.
Oh, you know, okay. That's okay.
Don't worry, we got the doc.
Let me share the screen.
Is that one of them?
That's one of them.
Yes,
Okay. So let's talk about this first one.
okay, the first one, 45,000. Services, okay. The way it works with BOCES is that BOCES charge us on a 12-month basis, and then usually at the end of the year, there's a supplemental bill that for anything that happened during the year that either they didn't pick up or we ordered last minute. So every year, usually we get the supplemental BOCES bill. And this is one of them. It's the supplemental that we needed money to be transferred to pay for these related services from BOCES. This particular one is for special education. In special education, you have 3 different BOCES accounts. I'm sorry, 2 BOCES accounts, one that is related and then one that is BOCES in general. The BOCES is for the tuition only, and the related is for the related services for our students that go to BOCES. So in this particular case, we were short in related services, either because in the IEPs in the middle of the year, we needed more, the child needed more services, or because probably we had a new student during the year that needed more related services. So this particular case is for a special education, a transfer to special education for related services for a special education student that we have in BOCES. The second one, $141,000.
Not that one.
Not that one.
That is the other voting one. The other two are related to guidance and
Not this one. Yes, that one. Or, yes.
Yeah, 141. Yeah. Again, this is another supplemental invoice that we got from BOCES, same issue. In this particular case, it was very likely additional students that we had in BOCES, and this was for the other account in BOCES, which is services from BOCES for special ed students that we send to BOCES. And in this case, the charge was or the difference was $141,000 that we had to transfer into the special education budget so they can pay BOCES. Special education, like we discuss every year, is one of the most difficult parts of our budget to project, because Lisa doesn't know how many potential new students we can get during the year. If we get, she budgets for a potential of 1 or 2, but a year we might get even more. The cost for each of these students can be in the hundreds of thousands. So very likely what happened this year is that we got new students that we had to send to BOCES, and in the supplemental, that's where they balance our account and say, okay, in September, you told me that you were going to have 10 students from your district, and each student, just to say something, to make it simple, was 100,000. So we bill you over the next 10 months $1 million. And then if in the middle of the year, you have additional students, they still only charging us the 100,000 per month. And then in the supplemental, either they send us money, or if in some cases the student leaves the district, in the supplemental, they will send us money back, or just charge it, credit it against a charge in other areas. But in this particular case, I can assume that is because we had new students going to BOCES.
So if you add more approved students, BOCES doesn't change the monthly draw that they expect from you. They keep it consistent for the year, and then at the end of the year, either give you back or ask you for the delta, whichever it is.
So that's why it's called supplemental. You have 12 payments. In the case of students, it's 10 payments. They divide by the number, and then at the end of the year, either we add or subtract, and then we either we pay or they send us money back.
You wanted to mention about the aid, BOCES aid?
Sure. There's several issues with aid. up until last year, our aid was about 15%. And then our aid last year went up to 40%. And that's because the major component of our BOCES aid all our state aid is the wealth ratio of the district. There's many other components, but that's the one that carries the heaviest weight. And our wealth ratio went from 1.6 to, I don't remember if it's 1.33 or 1.39, because of the closure of Indian Point. So that means that before the closure of Indian Point, it takes 3 years for them to recalculate the wealth ratio. Being in a 1.6 wealth ratio means that we're 60% richer than the average school district in the state of New York. Now we're only 33% richer than the average school in the state of New York, and that's why our state aid ratio went up. In the case of BOCES, this is part of the BOCES aid ratio, the BOCES aid the BOCES aid is based on all the usage that we do that we used from BOCES accounts. So in this case, for example, our BOCES aid is about 40%. We will get the following year 40% of this amount in BOCES aid. We expect BOCES aid to continue to go up because in the past, the director of technologies did not like to use BOCES, and now Benita likes it very much. So we're spending a lot more money with BOCES in technology, plus everything else that we've been using in the past. So going forward, you should see a greater BOCES aid in our revenues for the next year going forward.
It's not new expense, but you just shifted from paying to be the same expense, but we're just paying it through BOCES now, but correct.
Oh, yeah, for technology, yes. And if you remember, in the last board meeting, we also had to transfer about $350,000 to BOCES account because in the past, all our computers, we were leasing it through Chase, and now we're leasing it through BOCES. And like that, we're going to get also in those computers, the BOCES aid. So yes, we're not spending more in technology, we're just spending it in different places.
Thank you. Tamika, I think there's one more.
Yeah, the last one I have is just a corrective action plan. I just wanted to understand, I guess there's comments and there's response with dates that are dated prior to today that are action items. And I just want to know if those were completed or already been reviewed and assessed as yet.
Yes. We completed CAP 8 months ago, like we do it every year. For the last 6 years, since we knew about the closure of Indian Point, the board decided to increase the savings, the fund balance, the unassigned fund balance. So going forward, we can use some of the fund balance in reducing the tax rate. By law, we cannot have an unassigned fund balance of over 4% of the budget of the following year. So if you take into account that our budget, to make it simple, is $80 million, then we shouldn't have an unassigned fund balance of more than 3.2 million. we actually have about $20 million in unassigned fund balance. But the board has been very conscious on the fact that we've been over the 4%. For the last 4 or 5 years, I have always sent the same response to the state saying, because of the closure of Indian Point, we need to be prepared in the future to not to have large increases in our tax levy. And in the past, they agreed. This particular year, what they told me is, you need to give me a specific date that you are going to fix the problem. And that's how it is. Every year in the CAP, I have to give them a date when I'm going to fix the comment from the auditors. For example, another comment from the auditors was, you have accounts that are still open and you haven't used bank accounts. So I easily can write, by November, I'm going to close these accounts, and that's how they like it. So in this particular case, I told them, I cannot give you a date. And if I give you a date, it's going to be 7 or 8 years down the road, because that's when I'm going to start drawing down on my fund balance. So they told me that based on the law, then I have to say that I don't agree with the comment, but I need to know the board that I'm not agreeing with the comment and the board has to approve it. So that's why we're here approving this new cap, because that's the way the state wants us to do it.
So I think the question is, though, the dates that you have that are in this, they're all previous to today. So are those responses, have they all been satisfied?
Yes.
Okay, so you.
Actually, that's the cap that I presented to the board besides the first one. Besides the first one on, I think it was November of last year when the board approved it. So the only difference is the comment number 1. The rest is the same, and the rest, everything has everything was done as it was said in this in the response. For example, the special purpose fund inactive accounts, we closed those accounts way before January of this year.
All that's done, it's only one that is.
And I guess, are there any consequences to going over the percentage that we're allowed to keep?
Not really. Actually, we discussed, that was a discussion even with the state controller. Actually, I bought the state controller's report that they did for the district in July of 2019 because of the issue with Indian Point. And even in the report, they agree that we cannot maintain the 4% maximum, because then it will decimate financially the school district. So the auditors by law have to do it because we are above the maximum, but given our situation, no one either at the state or at the controller's office have asked any questions or there's any penalties. As it is, there are no penalties. It's just for the board SED to know that we are above the maximum, but no penalties.
Thank you.
I'd like to pull fiscal 6.4, the contract with this biotechnologies.
Do you have
specific question? Yeah, I just have a specific question actually for Dennis. So the contract, this is the contract to do the initial installation. What's the ongoing,
No,
what's the repetitive cost?
it's included for 5 years, so we're up to that point. It includes any, as I said, it's the size of a ream of paper. I'm so sorry. It's the size of a ream of paper, so it's a self-contained box. The only thing that could happen to it is it got knocked off the building or something, which would require them to come out and reinstall. The service charges are all included in the contract, so we're okay for the first 5 years, so that $399 covers us for a 5-year period.
It says a warranty, so but it's also a service contract.
Yeah, because there really isn't anything to do other than monitor and.
So they don't calibrate them or test them,
So I'm,
do you know?
yeah, I do, but there's some of it has to remain confidential, so I'm not avoiding it.
Okay,
I just don't want to make a public
so they
statement.
are calibrated, or if they need to be calibrated, that is included
There
in the
are
contract.
2 locations in the world. They're not, one's in the US, one is somewhere else.
Okay.
That's the backup, so they're covered 24/7, 365 days a year, 366, whatever.
Okay,
And if there is an issue, someone's gonna be out here and telling us they're doing something, but that's the reason for 2 per building. And that's the reason for putting them on the 5 buildings. So that there's built-in backup within it. And that's what the comprehensive plan was all about.
so this is really just a one-time, you're paying for 5 years of service upfront.
That's correct. We won't have a returning cost until 5 years out.
And then 5 years we'll have to
Yeah, well,
continue.
or maybe everything will be over with and we don't have to worry about
I don't think so.
it. I don't need the, but
That includes the cloud access too, right?
Yes, yes.
So that cost, Jen, was them providing the access to the cloud for us to be able to view it from a digital perspective, as opposed to a physical handheld monitor. Yeah, this included the technology for us to access this data that's warehoused somewhere else via the internet.
And so I see we have local ones, and then there's some sort of, you have ones that are installed, and then it looks like you have some sort of handheld
right.
device.
Our people will have it. Let me give you an example. The one I remembered from the explanation that was given to us, which made sense, is if you saw something that it appeared that there was a problem, you could quickly go with the device and check. So for example, if 2 people had MRIs that day and walked by the device at the same time, it would probably set it off. And so one quick way to do it is to check the people that are nearby to see, oh, that's the source, it's not the power plant, to avoid any commotion before we need to be.
Doing that, is that the building principal?
So that's what we need to establish here with Anthony, who has it and what training. This minimal training, I just want to be extremely careful at who has it so that no one pushes the panic button.
Yeah,
It's too much at stake, so we need to talk about, and we'll do that with the company to decide who's the appropriate people and who would have the device.
And that's why they put 2 devices on each building as well, because the likelihood during the explanation
One would go-
of one going off is very unlikely in the event of something from Indian Point. So if Indian Point were to have some sort of an, let's say, well, I don't know what the right word is, release, if something would occur that would cause these to trigger, it would likely be an event that was large enough for both of the rooftop devices to trigger, not just one. So the handheld would be another opportunity to confirm. If only one is going off, it's likely a localized issue that is not related to a wide scale problem. Does that make sense?
Anything else? Any other? I just realized that I did not stop to approve the consent agenda, so we have to do 2 different votes, I think. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda less fiscal 6.4.
Make a motion.
Can I have a second? Is that all in favor? This table is terrible. I can't see anybody. And then now that we've satisfied fiscal 6.4, I need a motion to approve 6.4. Can I have a second? All in favor? Okay, great. Now we move on to the donations. We have 2 donations this evening. Okay. Our first donation is the Hendrick Hudson Community Education Foundation has made a donation of $541.32 to fund welcome bags for the upcoming pre-K orientation at Frank G. Lindsay Elementary School. Okay. And the next, the Office of Special Education has received a donation in the amount of $250 to be utilized to pay for partial summer camp funding for students with significant handicapping conditions. Can I have a motion to approve the donations? Have a second? All in favor? Aye. Great. All right, that takes us to our superintendent's report. Dr. Laura.
Dana, this is related to the issue that you raised. So in considering, as we would, board policy, and I believe we have a copy of the policy and the board has a copy, it'll be posted in a minute. If you recall, in the spring, the board had decided that during the budget process that we would return to our board policy post-COVID. And of course, those are at kindergarten 22, grade 1 is 20, grade 2, 22, grade 3, 22, grades 4, 5, and 6 would be 26. And with that, we were monitoring on the second page or the second slide up to today, and we continue to monitor as we were going forward, looking at the class sizes and seeing if there is a potential problem. And what we began to realize, and I am recommending to the board, that we just simply, for 2 reasons. Let me first say this. The first reason being that we are aware that it's still post-COVID, but the students in grades 3 and 4 and 5 were affected by how their schooling went and missing time at school and the likelihood of that showing a gap either in their educational program in terms of achievement, and also the social emotional needs of those students became more prevalent. 2 things that we were trying to do in addressing that was, one, there's a funding source called Recov, which we're already in the midst of doing it. It's a rather large funding source from leftover COVID funds from the federal government to the state, and then the state dispensing them to the districts on a competitive level. So I know it's competitive, but it's matching funds. When we sat down to do it before, what I'm going to say in a minute, we were up to about $1.5 million. And then when we looked at it and we began to feel more comfortable with the process, and then my monitoring of this and my recommendation to the board would be to add 1 position at BV in grade 3, 1 section at Furnace Woods grade 4, and 1 section at grade 5, because they're all at the brink and the cusp. So do we want to sit around and wait, or do we just bite the bullet now and say, take it? I did that because in the screening of and seeing finalists for the grade 2 position that we had a while back, we did about 3 weeks ago, I was extremely impressed with all 3 of the finalists. And I said to Margaret, let's hold, this is my priority, but let's take a look at, and I'm prepared now to say, let's move ahead with, is seeing if they're still available, which we got a call today saying they are. So it's not a matter of how do we do this. We can do this rather quickly with board approval to keep those numbers back down, more in keeping with what existed before at the K1-2 levels. And again, under what we had proposed in the policy, which requires board action and my recommendation. So my recommendation is to add that. I'm asking the board to add the 3 positions, but for those reasons, specifically for COVID-related loss of proficiency levels are down. We know that anyway. We raised that point back in the June meeting. And then the other piece is the recover funds, which I feel strongly that I know we're doing a good job of writing it, and we had a chance today to add to the consortium, which will put our points up, because BOCES, Putnam Northern was willing to be a consortium with us, and it still would help us with our funding. So I have a feeling that we would get at least half that money back. So my recommendation to the board would be to add those 3 positions.
We want to discuss, go around the table and ask questions.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions for Dr. Laura?
I have a couple of questions or comments. So I fully support this, and I personally, and I understand why we're doing it. I just want to call out a couple of things, and a couple of things that have come up. And the reason that we initially went back to class cap in the first place. So we're trying to save, right? So we went back to class caps based on our policy, because we had agreed to, for last year, because of COVID, for similar reason, to keep the classes smaller at elementary and the Princeton plan transition. But the ultimate goal of Princeton plan, and what the community, that is pro Princeton plan has to understand, is that this is going to happen every year. This could happen every year. So all the savings that we're getting from Princeton, or that we were supposed to get from Princeton, could basically just be wiped out. So we had saved 3 teacher positions with retirements and attrition, and now we're hiring them. I think, listen, it happened. I just want to point out that this was the reason that we moved to this plan, because it was happening in our 3 individual community school buildings. The same thing is happening now in Princeton plan. That's my point. I hope I'm clear to everyone on what I'm expressing. Like, it didn't really make a difference. We're in the same position we were in community schools when it comes to this particular point. We were told that we were going to get 14 staff reduction. It's just impossible. So I just wanted to call that out. The other thing I want to call out, I want to make sure that, I think it's amazing to have smaller classrooms for children. I think it's great that we're across the board doing this. I want to make sure, and I think the board would agree, that whatever programs were in place, we have a present, hopefully get a presentation on what AIS will look like for students, and who would qualify and not qualify, and how kids would be referred to that program that because we're going to grow it and enhance it in some way to fill these gaps. I think that goes to, and also the bilingual population, or the newcomer population, how we're addressing those students to make sure that even with the smaller class size, are we getting what we need to fill the gap? Like, this is one step, but we have to make sure that we're doing it across the board.
I just want to make a comment, and that is that yes, and at either the late August or the early September meeting, we can fill the board and the public in. I'd like to do it earlier in September, so there's more community watching and
Yes, of
listening,
course.
because it's important. We've been working on it all summer, and I'm satisfied with the AIS plan. Today, we just realized that there was a BOCES program on newcomers and whatnot, that if it weren't that I kept pushing the issue and calling up there, that finally somebody told us they had the program, and we didn't know it existed, and Margaret's been asking for a year. So it was the request was going the wrong way. It was the tech program. Why it's in tech, I have no idea. But that person got back and told us, so we are exploring that, and we would be able to do that and report on it. Again, there's aid, and it's not a permanent thing. They're not going to go up there and stay
Yeah, no, we
forever.
don't want them to stay forever. We want
And
to
it's
get-
a secondary program.
so the students feel comfortable enough
That's correct.
to then come and join our
That's
students.
correct.
So we have a sort of I've heard the number get mentioned. I don't know if we've said it publicly, so if I talk out of turn, sorry. I know we have a goal of trying to get to 95% proficiency, correct? That is a goal as a district that we are looking to achieve from an academic perspective. Do we believe that this classroom adjustment is going to help put us on the right path to bring our students to a 95% proficiency level? Is this one of the many steps we need to take to put us in the right direction?
I would say yes.
Perfect.
And I would also say, I'm going to say it to public, to our teachers, that is my expectation, we're keeping the class size down, and there are all indications when you have lower class sizes, it should improve instruction, and the results should be better proficiency rates. So that is my expectation.
But I also know from going to that education conference that COVID money is running out. I know we have the RECOVS grant and that money is available. We had small class sizes this year. What did our test scores show? So now we have this year's, or last year's test scores, and we can compare them with these small numbers to next year's test scores. Are we going to get to that 95% rate? Or do we need to look at something else to get to these kids to 95%?
No. Need approval. No, we want, what I need is somebody to make a motion to.
That's what I'm saying.
Agree. Yes, that's what
Okay,
we.
all right.
Wait, one question.
Sure.
So along the lines of that 95%, when we have this follow-up conversation in September, that's gonna help paint the picture for the plan for what we intend to do to help get us further along in this round. Yes.
Yeah, correct. And, you know,
Not everyone knows what the AIS thing, so I just.
No,
want to spell
I
it out in
agree.
simple terms so everyone understands the book.
perfect. And the message to the full staff will be in this room on opening day with me saying it.
Wait, you're getting the whole staff together
Yes.
for super.
Our superintendent's
For next
conference
year.
day will have every employee.
Thank you so much. That
Sitting here.
that is amazing.
From the bus driver to the custodian, all the way through to cafeteria workers, teaching assistants, teachers, and all administrators, and the board is invited to be here too. And I intend to address it, and I've already let the cat out of the bag, so to speak, but anyway, I'm gonna have a big sign behind me with the number 95, and that is the theme of my talk. And how to get there.
That is excellent.
Just what, so these are current enrollments for next year. And they do not currently, this chart
Yes,
does not include the added class. So they're gonna get, so we're gonna get smaller.
that's correct.
But
Yes. If you add from the total, let's say, I'll just take an example. If you take the fourth grade of 126, it's 25.2. And it says that we have actually 5 sections, we're making that 6. So when you divide, it's going to be about 21.
that's, yeah, I just wanna confirm.
Mhm.
And then even third grade drops down.
Yes.
19.2,
Yeah. From 21.9.
so it'll be in line with the second grade. but
That's correct.
They're right at cap now, so yeah. They had to come.
I'm sure there will still be more students enrolling in the next month.
I just want to make sure
Sure.
everyone knew what
This data was.
Yeah, it's before, exactly.
Any comments? All right, I'd like to make a motion
To approve this. Second. All in favor? All right, that was a motion to approve adding 3 sections, 1 to each grades, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, anything else on your report?
No.
We did, yeah. All in favor, right? We all in favor.
Make sure.
Yep. Any other presentations or discussions? No, right? No, you want to share with us what you learned? Under committee
You know, it's-
reports, whatever.
You go to an educational conference and you get so pumped and excited that you can make a change. You're like, yes. So, yeah, I have so many notes and I'm gonna try to keep it really simple because I think it's good for all of us to hear and for the community to hear. So the opening day of the conference, Leadership and Learning. It was in Albany, and the first day, Dr. Betty Rosa, the Commissioner of Education, spoke. And she spoke about graduation requirements. And she talked about how do we prepare students for the future that some of us cannot imagine? What kind of skills do they need? And they really were hitting home about CTE, Career Development and Occupational Studies, pathways to graduation, and work-based learning, pathways to graduation. She talked about how civic awareness and participation are critical skills that are needed. The foundational skills know the difference between misinformation and the kind of info they need to make decisions, the students. And the comment that she made that really hit me is, and remember, she's talking to a bunch of Board of Ed members from all over New York. Do not define success in what we think is successful, because we're all up here. And I might think for my son, 100 is successful. Someone else might think a 75 or an 80 is successful, or you need AP courses, or you need to work. So I think we all have to be cognizant of that when we're making policies, not to make cookie cutter policies on what we think is a student who is successful looks like. She talked about the Blue Ribbon Commission that meets and how they're redoing graduation requirements. There's a lot about that. The state is going to be sending their report, or the Blue Ribbon Commission will be giving that report to the state in November and making recommendations for districts. But what I really got out of it is students were part of this commission, and the students in New York State, their big takeaway for graduation requirements that they wanted Board of Ed members to know is that dissonance that is in society impacts their ability to learn. So all this conflict that goes around them interrupts their learning. And I think we really need to hear that. Second thing, they don't want to just sit in a classroom. They want opportunities outside of the school day, outside of the classroom to learn. They want internships, work-based learning. They want options. Then I did a whole learning loss by COVID workshop. And it's funny because they had two districts there. One small district that was super wealthy, and one large district that was not wealthy. And both of them compared, and the state is now judging based on the improvements you made. What they did, and they had a lot of improvements to address learning loss. I'm going to look at the one that's not wealthy, because I want you to know that 75% of the students in this district that really had big improvements for learning loss, 75% of the students in this district are economically disadvantaged. 40% are ELF, and 11% are disabled. So we got to stop with, oh, it's our population. That hit home for me. What are they doing? They're data-informed communities. They look at the data together with the community to make informed decisions. And really, the data is informed instead of data-driven. They look to see, okay, is it working? We just talked about class sizes. Looking at that data, is that really working for our kids? They, in this district, offer all students high-impact tutoring. They have reading programs online that students, any student can access 2 to 3 times a week. They pair with the Huntington Learning Center. Any parent that wanted tutoring for their student could get it. I mean, it really, they blew me away because they improved their graduation by 50%, the graduation rate. And this is an underprivileged district. What they also found, and the state has found, is a lot of kids that experience learning loss are being misclassified as special ed students when it's learning loss. They're not special ed. So I think we have to look at that too. These districts offer, because they know COVID money is going away, telehealth. If these were in Long Island, they paired with Northwell Health. Telehealth, that students can call in on their cell phones and receive mental health. I mean, they're preparing for COVID monies to go away and looking at outside ways through the community to support these kids. I mean, then the other big thing I took, that all of these things that come out of New York State, these frameworks, the DEI frameworks, they're just suggestions. They are for you to bring back as a district and look at what works for your community. That's equity, what works for you. It's not everybody does the same thing, a one size fits all. So I mean, just as a board member, I thought about that and thinking like, okay, we have this, what works? We had asked the central office last year for data about behavioral referrals. Funny, they had a whole piece about restorative justice. And what the state has found is it's disproportionate. Black and brown students and Hispanic students receive in-school suspension and out-of-school suspension more. Now, I have to tell you, I sat in that conference and I said, absolutely not, that can't happen. We have to go to conference. If you do this, you get this. That can't happen. And one of the people that were sitting next to me told me that they did a deep dive into their data. And they found the same thing. They talked about how out-of-school suspension, and I have long thought this, does nothing. It just gets them out of school. For some parents, it's a hardship because they're unsupervised. Once again, that's not a one size fits all, because if they are harmful to other students or themselves, it's warranted. But it just blew me away with how much these districts are doing to combat learning loss. The DEI initiative that I saw that students presented is, last thing I'll talk about is they had student focus groups. There's one called Elevating Student Voices. They meet with students from all other districts. Think about how close we are to Peekskill, to Grove, to us. These students meet and they interact with each other and discuss topics relating to inclusive schools, race, equity, mental health, and wellness. Look at how close we are to everyone. I mean, I have to tell you, I've been going on, I've made some connections and looking at the DEI initiatives in these school districts that are impacting students positively. And I just really think that we have a chance here to look at data this year from a different lens, not so focused just on elementary school, on the whole district with the community to really make an impact. Okay, I'm pumped. Thank you.
I'm glad you're there. Because that would not have been as good of a recap.
Does anybody have any committee reports?
Today, the facilities committee met. We just went over some outstanding issues that we wanted to clean up from last year. And then also we talked about a look ahead for next year. The board is doing our annual school visits this year in the end of August. And then after that, the facilities will reconvene and make sure that we give the feedback to the central office, and that we also just discuss going further what we would like to see. And then hopefully in the fall, we'll have an update on EPC. We'll probably be the next one. And then on the VCS, we'll probably be later after that.
I just wanted to mention that we had our board retreat. That was 2 weeks ago. We talked about some operational things and, you know, got to know each other better, learned about the rules and regulations of being a board member, what makes a good board member, how we'll communicate. So we've all operational stuff, but we also talked a little bit about our goals and where we will be presenting them to the public and having a more public conversation about them, to decide about them, probably early in September is my guess, or we'll do that. Anything else that we want to?
Just that you were good on the way. List.
Policies?
Yeah, it's worth mentioning.
It's how many now? Humorous.
Our policy list right now that we have to look at and either revise or adjust is around 20. And we have to revise, adjust, or retire policy. But we also have, we all have great ideas of what policy we might want to bring forward. So that's all coming down the pike. I would the public, just to give you a heads up here, there will probably be some kind of policy at every, not work session, every board meeting. We probably won't bring policies to the boards. The school year of fixing and revising and retiring and bringing in the policy.
Yeah. All right, can I have a motion to close the meeting? Have a